When you think of Doom, you're probably thinking of this. But probably not this. Doom wasn't the original first-person shooter, but it was the first-person shooter. It's the game that really set the entire genre in motion. Doom was ambitious, violent, and exhilarating. It was id Software's magnum opus, a game that revolutionized the industry as a whole and shaped video games into what we know today. Doom 2, while not as earth-shattering as the original, was well received and, for better or worse, brought more Doom to the world. After Doom 2, id Software would move on to Quake, leaving Doom as the go-to game for ports to just about anything that could stand to handle it. Outside of Final Doom in 1996, which was comprised of 2 giant fan mods that id eventually signed and released themselves, and Doom 64 in 1997, which id had little to nothing to do with, Doom was largely left without any major new entries, especially any that were developed by id Software themselves. Jump on over to 2004 and Doom 3 hit store shelves and was a critical and commercial success. Yet, of all the mainline Doom games, 3 stands as the most maligned entry in the series, often being cited as bad because it changed so much of what everyone had come to expect of Doom. That's the thing. Is Doom 3 really so bad just because it wasn't more of the same? Or is it truly a game that deserves a second chance? The answer is yes, and also no. As you likely guessed from the title of this video, we're going to take an in-depth look at why Doom 3 is a bad entry for the series. Not only that, we'll also look at why removing the 3 from the title allows the game to flourish and makes it worth checking out. Keep in mind, when I say Doom 3, I'm referring to the BFG edition of the game that's been out since 2012 and was released on modern consoles in July of last year, so no flashlight crap is involved here. With all that in mind, let's get the bad out of the way first. The story in every Doom game prior to 3 barely constituted as window dressing. You weren't really focused on who you were, why you were there, and the inner workings of hell itself. You were just Doom Guy, blowing everyone's head off with your vast array of weapons. So right off the bat, the emphasis on Doom 3's story leaves something to be desired, at least as far as the cutscenes are concerned. Take a look at this shot right here. If you've never played Doom 3 before, I want you to guess which one of these guys you play as. Have you figured it out yet? 'Cause it's neither. Okay, go into the vent now. And there you are, this dork. Supposedly this is the same Doom guy as in the rest of the games, despite this being a reboot, but the point here is that nearly every cutscene in Doom 3 plays out like this. You're constantly chasing after the next cutscene. Very rarely do you take part in much of anything that happens. This wouldn't be a huge deal if the game didn't feel the need to literally switch to third person for some offbeat reason. Each cutscene feels detached from everything else the game is trying to accomplish, which is a shame, because the other storytelling element Doom 3 has works phenomenally well, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Doom 3's emphasis on story means that the game as a whole has slowed down. In previous Doom titles, players could speed through maps, with the only thing trying to slow them down being the demons who need more lead in their diet. Doom 3 instead adds a new level of interactivity with the world itself, which was probably pretty impressive in 2004, but in just about every year since, these sections are just boring and monotonous. Id very clearly were wanting the computers in Doom 3 to have a little more to them than just running up and mashing a single button, and it's a commendable effort. Hell, there's a lot of repeated instances that I feel like it's done right. The problem is that you get sections like these, the service lift. Listen, this thing just sucks. Yeah, a few demons try to jump out and scare you, but overall it's a chore to just sit and wait for this thing to finish its animation before you can actually continue. Arguably, this is Doom 3's biggest and most repeated offense. The constant waiting. Those cutscenes we discussed earlier, you can't skip those, nor can you skip the many scripted sequences early on in the game. Again, those looked amazing in 2004, but when you really just want to get to blasting demons and hellspawns, the start-stop nature can be a major turnoff. Now, with all that in mind, Doom 3's slower pace and story-driven gameplay sounds like a recipe for disaster. And if you're hoping to play something that's a more modern take on the classic Doom formula, Doom 3 ain't it. We thankfully have Doom 2016 and Eternal for that. But think back to the distant past, the long, forgotten year of 2000. The year Doom 3's development began. Valve's Half-Life has completely reshaped what video games could be, offering a story that is told entirely in front of the player, with zero breaks for cutscenes, no result screens of any kind, just a scientist trying to escape a disastrous research facility. Half-Life married storytelling and gameplay together in a way that hadn't quite been done before, certainly not to this level of success. I'll be honest, I did some digging and couldn't really find anything concrete about Doom 3 taking any inspirations from Half-Life, but there's enough similarities that I feel like there was some influence in the series' new direction. For instance, you play as a silent protagonist who heads into a mysterious facility on what should be a routine day, only for something to go horribly wrong. You then spend a large portion of the game uncovering what exactly happened, who's responsible, all while fighting your way to freedom. These similarities are no means a bad thing, nor is it an accusation of copying someone's homework and changing a couple names. If anything, this explains why Doom 3 exists as it is, and what mentality you'll have to have while playing. Remove Doom from the equation and you get something like this. Wait, no, that's a bad idea, change it. There we go. Doom 3 moves away from pure carnage and slows everything down in an effort to create atmosphere. To be perfectly honest, I've never found Doom scary, at all. The newer Doom games make zero effort to be a horror game despite the themes of, demons and hell, and frankly, that's A-okay with me. Doom 3, on the other hand, strives towards scaring you. How well it accomplishes this task is subjective, but at the very least, Doom 3 will create a sense of unease. Large swaths of the game are shrouded in pitch-black darkness, requiring players to conserve their flashlight batteries and stamina meter. In previous Doom games, running away from a hairy situation is usually an option, but in Doom 3, the stamina meter means the player can only run so fast and for so long. It doesn't help that the total darkness will disorient you should your flashlight die out. Doom 3's pace, despite being infinitely slower than almost every other mainline entry, works to its advantage when all three of these are in play. The thread connecting these elements is Doom 3's much more linear level design. There's still little secrets packed around here and there, but despite all that darkness, you won't really get too lost amongst the corridors of the UAC base. That said, there is some of the standard Doom affair intact. For instance, a lot of Doom's bigger fights will stick players in a sort of arena-esque setting, akin to the earlier titles, and have them duke it out with the baddie of the minute. You'll also have the occasional puzzle to solve, key to find, and most often, PDA to download. Earlier we talked about the cutscenes of Doom 3, and how they didn't really jive well with the gameplay, feeling disoriented and disconnected. That's how half of the story to Doom 3 is told. The more optional half is told through the PDAs of the UAC staff. Instead of collecting keys repeatedly to open doors, Doom 3 has players downloading data off said PDAs, which includes security clearance to access new areas. Not only that, the PDAs will also download an audio recording from said staff, along with their emails. While listening and reading these aren't required, they add an extra layer of depth to the story and are arguably much more interesting. Audio recordings and emails can include anything from secrets about the day-to-day operations at the base to a staff member complaining about their boss. These are typically where you'll find locker codes, the repeated instances we mentioned earlier, where the panels in the game are actually kinda neat. Sure, entering the code itself isn't too exciting, but finding the numbers from whichever staff has said code is pretty fun and engaging. Every recording is well acted and adds to the former life that once inhabited the base, allowing you to really piece together who exactly the UAC is, and what they were trying to do on Mars, and how it all went so horribly wrong. To be honest, I think Doom 3 would have benefited from the near entirety of the story being told this way, but I can understand why developers and business folks alike may not have agreed on that in 2004. However, hidden audio logs are something that games have continued to do. BioShock used these to illustrate life in Rapture both before and after its collapse, for instance, and even in the latest Doom games, 2016 and Eternal, they both feature audio logs or totems that give insight to the lore of the series and how they're all interconnected. Beyond all that, Doom 3 is still an id Software game, meaning that it may not be the same Doom as always, but the shooting works as you'd expect. There's plenty of weapons to use, all of which work better on certain demons than others, and the demons themselves still have a fair amount of variety, even if they are largely redesigned. Said redesigns may seem off-putting at first, but And that's the point. The idea here is to make something creepy to drive home that constant sense of unease. The sound design, for instance, does a superb job at giving players a relative idea where the monster is, or at least could be. Doom 3 takes the eternal darkness approach of trying to drive the player mad, randomly playing voices that you can just make out, but you aren't sure if it's the game or not. Doom 3 has several tricks like this, which I don't want to spoil, but do note, Doom 3 will go out of its way to try to spook you, and if you've got headphones on, there's a chance it might get you a time or two. If you're a major Doom fan who wants to blow the faces off demons while gunning through levels at lightning speed, Doom 3 is not the game for you. Or at least, not for that particular need. Doom 3 is an interesting beast. It's got a solid campaign that requires the player to forget what it's actually called to better their enjoyment. Was it a good idea to call it Doom 3? Probably not, considering any number title to a long-standing franchise tends to have a level of expectation that is simply impossible to meet. But as a horror shooter that takes some liberties with the series and offers a fairly unique take despite its flaws, yeah, I'd say so. Either way, it may not be Doom, but Doom 3 is a well-polished shooter that's worth checking out if you can, and are willing to set aside the classic mindset. Thankfully, since Doom 3, everyone in the gaming industry learned that adding numbers to decades-old series was a bad idea, and they never ever made that mistake again.